And hello, everyone. Welcome to February 7th, Tuesday. Believe it or not, we're actually a quarter of the way through the month. Only 3 more weeks exactly to go. It's hard to say that on the 7th, but it is February, so it is the short month. So, would like to welcome KC Grifant here. I hope I'm saying that right. I should have asked before the show. Duh.
Close enough. Hi, thanks for having me.
But you just came out with a new book. It launched on Sunday, if I'm correct.
Last week, Thursday, started rolling.
Thursday. Okay. Talk a little bit about that. I'm intrigued with it, especially with the type of book it is.
Yeah, so it's called Melinda West, Monster Gunslinger. It just came out from Bridget's Gate Press, which is an indie press. And it's a action, adventure, horror, adult novel set in the Old West, but with monsters. So it's kind of an alternate history story. It takes place during the Old West, and monsters had poured into this region and kind of forced humans to band together. And the central premise of the story is centers around a gunslinging couple in their late 20s. They're kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde like duo, and they're monster exterminators, kind of like Ghostbusters or The Witcher. So they track down creatures ranging from flying scorpions to gremlins, and they're trying to retire, but then they accidentally release a demon that steals souls. So they're way in over their heads, and this demon steals the soul of their dear friend and mentor. So they have to track an outlaw to find the demon across like treacherous lands, some fight a ton of monsters, and try to stop this supernatural war. And that's basically it. Okay.
I like the combination. I'm actually seeing a supernatural Western type vibe in there as well.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Some people actually said it reminded them of the show Supernatural, but kind of, yeah, in the Old West.
In the Old West. So I know you write multiple genres. So with multiple genres, is it hard not to mash up the...
Yeah, I don't really think of like, okay, this is strictly a sci-fi, so I'm just going to focus on, sci-fi elements. I've always kind of mushed things together, especially with sci-fi horror. That's one of my favorite genres, like aliens, just kind of that scary sci-fi tales. So that's actually where I was writing primarily, but then a little bit of dark fantasy too. And when I started writing the Old West story, which is a genre called Weird West, which is basically Old West plus any kind of supernatural or speculative elements. It just, I don't know, flowed pretty naturally.
Very nice. So what got you started into writing? What would you say was your inspiration?
Yeah, I started when I was pretty young. So I don't think there was a moment or turning point. Pretty much as soon as I learned to write and like those like lined note papers, I was writing stories, and I was always writing stories that had like a kind of sci-fi or fantasy bent. The very early story I remember writing was one page, and it was about a girl who shrunk down to ride on a paper airplane like around the classroom. I think I was 8 or 9, however old you are when you can start writing. And the teacher would read my stories out loud to the class. And after a few stories, suddenly everyone recited with her the ending, which was the same ending I did on all of them, which was "It was all a dream." And it was like a shock. And it made me realize I need better endings for my stories.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah. So you're back. Actually, I don't want to say pushed into it. That's not a good word, but led into it, drawn into it, led into it.
Yeah. I think a lot of writers, you just kind of start pretty early and you love reading and writing, and it all just kind of, I don't know, just happens. Like there's not necessarily a moment where you say, oh, I want to be a writer or I want to start writing. It's just kind of from a young age, enjoying stories and books.
That's always fun.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking a little bit beforehand about Comic Cons, so I have to ask: do you do signings at Comic Cons? Do you go to Comic Cons to sign books?
Well, this is actually my debut novel. I've been in many anthologies. I've had sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and actually weird Western stories in magazines, print anthologies, podcasts. So I have done some events like with the anthology signings, but this book's my debut book, so I'm hoping to do more kind of events. But typically what I've done, we have the Horror Writers Association San Diego chapter here, which I co-founded and I chair. And we try to do some events, sometimes WonderCon, Comic-Con, book festivals. And it's a great chance to share all the different types of horror with readers, because a lot of people don't realize there's actually a huge variety and a lot of good stuff.
I know an event down here that y'all would be perfect for, but
which one?
That's a long travel. Houston Horror Film Festival.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
Yes, and they actually have a new one that's coming this year, so that's going to be interesting. So we're going to have 2 big horror events.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice. So, they all make it over there.
So let's talk a little bit about the Horror Writers Association. And I know y'all do awards for y'all's people and stuff like that. How is that? I mean, it's got to be difficult going through stuff and for the awards, because each person writes different.
Yeah, right. And the awards are run through the kind of national leadership. So it's such an interesting organization because you have the national leadership. And then in a lot of cities, you have chapters, and each chapter is very different. Like our chapter focuses a lot on events. Some chapters focus on, beta reading or writing workshops. So actually, if you have any horror writers out there listening, they should definitely check into their HWA nearby chapters if they're interested in that. But yes, every year there's the Stoker Awards, and it's a pretty well run process. Members can kind of submit and recommend works, and the list gets narrower and narrower. And I love looking at the finalist ballots because you get so much great reading suggestions from it. From new novels to debut novels to short stories to nonfiction. And some of them are free to read, even to the general public, especially some of the short stories are available for free. So it's such a great process and a great way to learn about new authors and new pieces.
I definitely know a few people that do watch that will probably be interested in that. So I will definitely send them the link to this show so they can find out more.
Yeah, it's in Pittsburgh this year. But yes, the awards are streamed, so anybody can watch them.
Cool. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show about the Western and how you put it all together. So if we can go into a little bit of detail about that. What drew you into that?
Yeah, I think so my way into writing what we call weird Westerns, so Westerns with the speculative element, like sci-fi, fantasy, horror, I think is different than a lot of Western writers in that I didn't really grow up watching Westerns or being very drawn to that. I've seen some, but it never really clicked with me until I started playing a card game called Doomtown, which is based on the Deadlands universe. And my husband and I actually started to play competitively regionally in Southern California, won some games, and it was a great community. But what I really loved was that the cards had a huge variety of characters, especially a lot of women characters, which I hadn't really seen before in the Old West setting, like gunslingers, lawmakers, kind of the whole thing. So then I actually started writing official stories for the cards. which was fun. And then I wanted to build my own kind of Weird West universe and characters. So that's when I started writing kind of my world. And I wrote several short stories featuring this duo, this gunslinging duo, and they were well received and published. And then I thought, well, let me try a novel and put them on a really epic adventure. And that's what just came out.
Very nice. Do you think that you might, the way you said you were writing stories and they perceived it well, do you think that your story might end up being a card game like that?
That would be very cool. There's a lot of stuff that goes into creating a card game. So, you never know. But the Deadlands universe is very kind of well established and very interesting. So I don't know that I could compete with that. But hey, if somebody wanted to base a card game on it, I would be totally excited for that.
You'd be surprised how far indie stuff would goes.
That's true. That's a good point.
Of course, a lot of it happens to work with Kickstarter, and I know you would have to have a lot of artists for those cards.
Yeah, right.
So I can see how it would be hard to start one up even with a Kickstarter, but it would be fun.
It would be really fun. Yeah, maybe someday that would be.
Now, where can people find your books at, or your debut novel, should I say?
Yeah, Melinda West Monster Gunslinger. It's available kind of anywhere you would buy books. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books. And then, some select bookstores, indie bookstores, potentially, they have the option of ordering it. So, you could always request it from your bookstore if you wanted.
And if people wanted to follow you?
Yeah, I'm on, my website is KC Grifant, my last name.com. And then I'm on pretty much all the major social media channels at KC Grifant. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then I have a newsletter on my website as well. So definitely happy to have people come by and say hi.
Get that up there for you. But I do want to thank you for being on the show. It was fun having you. And I can't wait to hear more about the Western. Like I told you before the show, I have one out. So it's kind of unique hearing the differences.
Yeah, I think it's a great genre that is experiencing a resurgence. And I hope people enjoy it.
Definitely. And everybody, go check out her work. You can check her out at kcgrifant.com. It is spelled in there in the YouTube channel, so definitely go check her out. And until our next show, which will be in about an hour, adios.